Do we want to do anything else about spring and then move into summer? Because I see we're moving into summer with corn.
Yeah. Well, summer's corn for you. It's not for us.
Right. so hey guys, so we are here with Danny from Deep South Homestead, and if you've been following our series about North versus South as far as homesteading and gardening, this is going to be a really fun segment.
It is.
Because there's night and day. Not that there wasn't night and day between the others,
right.
But this one is night and day.
Yes.
We're going to talk about summer. So at what point because I see that's kind of the for us it's like cut and dried. For you it's kind of like this blob that extends.
Yeah. I mean, when we're talking about peas, we talk about in the summertime here, English peas is out of the picture. English peas are over with here by May. Mm-hmm. There's no such thing as, well, you know, it's actually before May, it's April. Mid-April, there are no English peas.
Wow.
It's too hot. They die, they just go away. For us, we have what's called pink-eyed purple hulls. We have Mississippi purple hulls. We have Crowders. There's probably an innumerable amount of peas that grow down here during the summer months. And they have they're not sweet. They have a completely different taste than a English pea does.
So starchy, really
starchy. They're very starchy peas down here. And when we're talking about English peas in the springtime, it's something I like to bring out. A lot of people say, I can't stand English peas, I don't like them. That's a big issue here. People do not like English peas.
Do they get bitter and dry?
Because they get bitter. Now there's a reason why they get bitter. When you pick an English pea, it's predominantly sugar.
Right.
You have about 45 minutes to get that pea from what you're doing to getting it either frozen or getting it in a jar.
Yeah.
Because if you let it go beyond an hour, the sugars become starch.
Yeah.
And that's why in the South here, and it's because of our heat. It has nothing else to do with it. The simple fact is just because of our heat. Sweet corn, exactly the same way.
Really?
If you harvest sweet corn, people will go out here and they'll pull a whole pickup truckload of it and they'll bring it in and try to process it. And by the time they finish late that evening, it has a sour taste to it.
That's too bad.
Yeah, and so here, Wanda and I, when we do our corn here on Deep South Homestead, we will pull, say, 40 or 50 ears. We'll bring it to the house. We'll process it. We go back, even if it's the next day, we go back and get 40 or 50 more because that sweetness in it turns to starch almost immediately. So, I mean, that's one of the things. Y'all may not have that problem where you're at. I don't know.
It's not nearly as, like with the peas, there's a huge difference between when you first pick them and within a few hours. They won't have as much sweetness, and the same thing goes for corn. Yeah. They won't have as much sweetness after a few hours, but we can store corn from out of the field for a couple weeks in the grocery store.
Wow.
And it won't turn sour on you. It just doesn't taste very similar to what it did, but people who wouldn't know any difference, who'd never had corn from straight out of the field, they wouldn't know the difference.
Right.
So. See, and here's one question I have is one of the main reasons I have never even thought about going to the South as far as wanting to plant here is the pests, as far as like the garden. Because my sister lived in Mississippi for a while. And she said, oh my gosh, the squash borers, I never even got a squash off my plant because everything that I put in the ground, it got eaten as soon as it came up, and it was in the spring, it wasn't even into the summer yet. What about pests? Because for us, it's still too cold until the middle of summer for there to be a lot of pests.
Once again, the whole issue with the springtime and down summer and the summertime here, things like squash, you can't plant them during the heat of the summer. Mm-hmm. Because she's exactly right. The pest will actually destroy them. Now there's some tricks down here with squash borers. Squash borers is one of the problems we have here. Another problem we have here is what's called a pickle worm. Mm-hmm. It will actually bore holes in your squash. If you try to grow squash outside and it's say 90 to 100 degrees, the pickle worms will just eat them up. Mm-hmm. So you learn that there's some things you can grow in extreme heat, some things you cannot grow in extreme heat. Squash for us would be a very early spring thing. Really? For us, yeah.
We can't plant ours until middle June, and then we have to protect them.
Really?
Mm-hmm. We have to protect them from the cold.
Wow, that's really amazing. You know,
because our ground doesn't even get to 60 degrees it doesn't get to 60 degrees, and so you're supposed to wait till it gets to 60 degrees.
Yeah.
And you know, by the time we hit July, we might be to 60 degrees.
Wow.
It doesn't even get warm in June. It's
Okay.
t-shirt weather, but you don't get hot until it hits July.
Maybe one and I may need to be. What would be the word? They call it when people come south or snowbirds. What would you be called if you go from south to north? Migratory?
Is it sunbirds?
I think he called them sunbirds.
Sunbirds?
Oh,
Because I actually leave here in the summertime, used to when I was working, and I go to New York and different places to work because it's cooler.
I have cousins that do that. They live in Arizona.
Yeah.
And so when it gets to be the middle of summer for us, they'll come up and it'll be 85 degrees outside, and they'll be out on the lawn in armchairs just laying out asleep. And I'm like, they're going to fry to death. It's 85 degrees out there. They're going to die.
But it depends on the humidity. You know, if the humidity is low,
we have no humidity.
it's very tolerable.
And they'll just lay out there in their armchair and just bask in the warmth. And I'm just like, you're going to fry to death. And they just think it's so wonderful and so cool. And
I can agree with them. When I was working in New York, I was out there and one of the guys hauled out and says, "Dude, it's 80 degrees out there. The humidity's 35%. You're going to have a heat stroke." I'm like, dude, this is spring for us.
Right. Yeah, we will get a little bit of humidity, just a tiny bit of humidity.
Wow.
Maybe once a year. Tiny.
That's amazing to me.
Yeah.
To just think about there's no humidity.
No humidity.
So nothing rots.
Nothing. We had wet wood underneath our deck for 15 years. The termites did not go from the wood into the house. They were just in the wood because the wood itself was wet, because when it snowed in the winter, some water would get through the deck onto this wood. And I pulled the wood out from under the deck and put it out in the sun. The termites got eaten by the chickens, and then the wood was fine and had no more damage to it.
That's just amazing.
Because it's too dry, too hot, no protection.
That's amazing. I mean, those logs laying right out there that you can see from here have been there maybe a month.
Yeah.
If I was to go out there and roll them over right now, they've got termites in them.
Yeah. I've got huge logs in my front pasture.
Yeah.
Huge logs that were half dead when we got, just because they were decayed. They haven't shrunk, and they've been there for almost 3 years.
Wow. Man. It's almost worth a trip just to
come experience it,
experience it. Yeah, especially in the summer months.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the weeds stop at a certain point, because unless you water something, the weeds get to a certain size and then they just stop growing and nothing else grows. So if you go out and weed whack occasionally, you don't have to worry about weeds unless you're applying water to it, because
That just don't even sound right.
So if they stay here 2 or 3 weeks and help us, we'll go there up in the middle of the summer when it's 105 degrees, and we'll work her yard.
We don't work after 10 o'clock at my place because it is too hot.
Now, what do you call too hot?
After it gets past about 75 degrees, we stop working.
When we wake up in the morning here, it's hotter than that.
Yeah. When it hits 75 degrees, for one reason is we have a lot of yellow jackets, and they hide in everything, and so you're liable to get stung if you work after about 10 o'clock.
Wow.
So I stopped working. But the altitude is high enough that you get a sunburn a lot easier. You get sunstroke really easy because we have so much bright sunshine. The air is thinner, and so even if you're used to it, a lot of times if you try and work out in it too long, you can get sick.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I mean, I've been up north a lot. I've hunted up north. I've done all these different things up north, but I've never actually tried to grow anything up north.
Mm-hmm.
And to just listen to you talk about the difference in the life and the way y'all live and the way things grow.
That's why we're all so stiff. We're such stiff upper lips and hurry is because you got a short growing season.
And I can see that.
Now. There's no time to sit and visit. There's no time to just kind of wait for things to happen, because when it hits, boom. Now we have 3 months. Now.
And if you don't do it, you don't get it.
You don't.
Well, since you've been down south, have you noticed how laid back we are?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, literally, we say, well, if we don't do it today, we'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know.
It'll come around.
We'll get it done tomorrow. And maybe that's why we lost the war. I don't know.
Well,
The north versus the south.
Yeah.
it's just
You heard it
different.
first at Deep South Homestead, y'all.
Right. Well, and I think that it's true. It's your landscape shapes you. It's what culture is. It's why culture is what it is because your food and the way that you get your food shapes the way that you live your life.
I can agree with that.
If
Yeah.
you're living true to your seasons and true to your landscape, then it affects your personality.
Yeah. I mean, if literally here, if we had, I'm sitting here thinking about this. If I knew that this next week it was going to turn warm, and I have 3 months, that would be overwhelming.
Yes.
To literally know that, first of all, I'd be sitting here going,
Hyperventilating.
I'd be like, I don't even have anything started in the greenhouse. I mean, I don't have any, because if I was down south and I moved up north, I'm quite sure I would grow nothing the first year.
Yeah. You just have to get used to it.
Simply because, first of all, I wouldn't get my seed started at the right time.
Huh.
And then, if I went to the store and got something, I'm not sure I would know how to do it because of the difference in the soils. Because I know when I was in Tennessee, everything is alkaline.
Mm-hmm. And we're alkaline.
So you're alkaline too. So you have a lot of
Very
cedars in some around.
We have sagebrush.
Yeah, we have
sagebrush.
sagebrush here now.
Yeah.
Lots of it.
Yeah.
But I noticed up there that like you see the red cedar growing over yonder, they were everywhere in the mountains. And the people told me, said they have to put sulfur out to actually make their soil pH come down.
Yeah.
Do y'all have to do that?
We don't use sulfur. Most people just that I know, that a lot of people will take a lot of carbon and actually rototill it into their gardens. So rather than necessarily adding amendments, people that I know that have successful gardens use grass. They'll take grass clippings and turn them
Green
into their
grass
soil.
clippings put the nitrogen back, and it then turns to a carbon.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't personally know anybody that actually medicates their soil in any way. We're just careful about the variety that we pick. And so instead of fighting the nature of our soil, instead we're just really careful about using the right seed, the one that can handle the alkalinity. Because, I mean, the soil is going to, because we don't get a lot of rain, the alkalinity increases and increases and increases, and it never changes. And so you might as well just pick a seed that likes alkalinity.
I've got what you're saying. So here, where we have to constantly be putting some kind of amendment into the soil because of our high rainfall, and when the rain hits the ground because of the sand content in it, everything's depleted.
Yeah.
It just goes down.
Yeah.
You don't have that.
What you put in our soil stays in our soil because we don't get rain.
Wow. Remember, what happens up north stays up north.
It does. It stays. It stays
That doesn't
in our
happen
soil.
here.
Yeah.
That's just, it's almost frustrating now to sit and think about it, you know. We constantly, I'll tell you, for instance, corn. When I put corn out, I have to fertilize the fool out of it when I plant it. When it's a little bit above ankle high, I have to heavy nitrogen it again. When it's knee high, that's the last nitrogen, we call it laying it by. We pour the nitrogen to it. I mean, we're talking about lots of nitrogen, because if you don't, in the heat, because the heat is so intense, it won't make anything. You have little ears about that long. That's about it.
Most of the people that I know, the way that they fertilize the grannies that have their gardens that are so beautiful is they'll bring in a load of steer manure. They'll have it rototilled in. Not necessarily every year, maybe every other year, but some will do every year. But and that's enough for the full year. They don't have to reapply anything because it just builds up from year to year as long as they just kind of watch when it needs a little bit more, and that's all they do.
That's just
And grass clippings, lots of grass clippings.
wow. The differences between the north and the south is so complex.
So complicated. It's not a little deal.
It is not a small deal.
No.
I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, well, would it do you and me good if we just maybe
Little garden.
but what we meet halfway somewhere,
Right.
like Arkansas or through the Ozark area, maybe through there, Oklahoma. I mean, I don't know. I mean, is there some point where it's really okay both ways?
Well, and I think that's the point is that you have pockets everywhere of certain things and certain conditions, and so it's so much better to learn from your granny than it
Yeah.
is from some guy in a book or from some expert on YouTube.
Oh, I can agree with that.
It's that you go out because otherwise you're going to just be fighting it for 3 years, or you can do it right the first time because you went and asked Granny, Granny, what do I do here? What
Yeah.
should I add to my soil? How much should I water it? What seeds should I use? That's why seed saving is so important. If you get
Yes.
seeds from your granny, you know they're going to work.
Right, because they've already been acclimated.
Yeah. And so I think gardening is about culture. Gardening is about culture, and it's about your local culture, and it's about because you could go an hour away from our place. You go to northern Idaho, and it is rolling hills, and it's rich soil, and they get rain. You go further to closer to southeast Idaho, and you're desert, and then you get into Utah, and you've got magnificent soil and balmy weather, but you
Wow.
you only went a couple hours in any direction. It's going to be different.
Well, Mississippi's the same way.
Yeah.
When I lived in central Mississippi, everything I did here would not work there.
Right.
Because first of all, they had a totally different kind of soil. They had what was called a heavy clay soil, and it was called a cold soil.
Mm-hmm.
No sand whatsoever. I had to bring in my own amendments to that soil just to be able to work it. If it rained, I could not do anything for 2 weeks. I'm used to down here, if it rains, I can plow tomorrow.
Yeah.
I can hoe tomorrow. I can do whatever. I can plant tomorrow.
Yeah.
But up there, I had the skimpiest little garden that you could ever imagine. Where down here, I grow beautiful, luscious stuff.
We noticed that driving, or I guess maybe John didn't notice that, but I noticed that coming in the RV parks. I always notice the soil. And we had such slick clay. One place we had red slick clay, the next place we had gray slick clay, and we had tons of puddles that we couldn't go for a walk because of the puddles. The water was going nowhere.
Nowhere.
And then we drove into Danny and Wanda's. There were no puddles, and we had rain the whole night that we came in. But when we came out to go for a walk in the morning, there were no puddles to get around. It was all sand.
It's all sand.
And and we didn't drive that far. You
drove less than 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is it that you're wanting to plant? What is it you're wanting to grow? And buy property in that space so that you don't have to fight your soil.
Exactly. I agree with that 100%.
So I'm gonna let you start because you definitely. It's your extreme season, whereas winter is our extreme season, summer is your extreme season.
It is, Julie. Summertime down here is extremely intense. I mean, we're talking about from, say, mid-June all the way till... Actually, we can go past summer with the temperatures. We'll be in 100-plus degrees. There's a lot of stuff down here that just will not grow. Now, it will grow. Let me retract that. It will grow. But it will not grow efficiently. Like tomatoes, for instance. Now, I don't know how much y'all know about tomatoes, but tomatoes are only designed to grow from 60 degrees to 85 degrees. Anything hotter than 85 degrees, the tomato ceases to set fruit. Mm-hmm. And that's why a lot of people down south do not understand. They go, well, I've got these beautiful tomato plants out there. I don't know what's going on with them. That's 100 degrees. They're not going to set much fruit. Now, they will set occasional fruit, but when they do, the intense heat, the cell structure of the plant begins to break down, and thus the tomato will not form like it's supposed to form. So, tomatoes is one of the things down here that we have a major issue with in the summertime, because what will happen is, as the tomato grows, the skin becomes extremely tough because of the extreme heat that's on it. And if we have any period, say we go 2 weeks and it doesn't rain, and then we get a heavy rainstorm in here, which a typical rainstorm for us in the summer is 1 to 5 inches. If that happens, that skin has become so tough and being baked by the sun that it splits.
Wow.
And tomatoes, unless you get it off at that moment and it's red, it happens to be red at that moment, it's useless to you. Mm-hmm. So tomatoes is one of the big issues we have in the summer down here. Another issue is going to be the yellow, like you take a yellow crookneck squash. Now zucchinis do a little bit better, but the yellow crookneck squash, what happens here is the plants come up beautiful, they do beautiful, they look beautiful, but the squash borers move in and they start attacking the plants. That or powdery mildew will set in on them. The plants will be beautiful one morning, you go out there the next morning because of the extreme humidity, powdery mildew will have formed on the leaves, the plants will grow for another week or so and they'll die. Another thing that will happen is it will grow, it will set fruit. You'll have beautiful squash on them, and they'll look perfect. You go out there and pick them, and if you don't have a real close eye, you go pick them and bring them in the house, and when you cut them open, they're full of pickle worms. Because the pickle worm bores a little hole in that squash, no bigger in diameter than a toothpick, and they just go inside and they feed on the seeds in it.
Yuck.
So people think that down south that it's really easy to grow things in the summertime, and it is, but not without a pest issue.
Right.
I'm trying to think of something else that might be another issue. Another issue would be something maybe like cucumbers. Mm-hmm. Cucumbers do fantastic in the late spring, early summer, but as far as the intense heat of the summer, they just die off.
So in the summer, is that almost your need for storage season?
The summertime for us is relaxation a lot of times, because when we get up in the morning here, our morning time temps will be, say, 75 degrees when we walk out the door. Some mornings 80. When we walk out the door with 98 to 100% humidity. And you go out, and Wanda and I will start, a lot of times we start at 5 o'clock in the morning, and by 8:30 to 9 o'clock, you're in the house. You are drenched from just literally from the humidity and the heat. You've depleted your body. And it's time to come in.
So for someone beginning in Mississippi, what would be really good, safe, sound advice for how to take care of yourself in the summer as a homesteader then? Because I would imagine for us winter, it's really important you take care of yourself in the winter. How do you take care of yourself in the summer?
Hydration. And I know contrary to what I'm fixing to say is going to be a contrary statement, salt. Mm-hmm. Lots of salt in your body, because I know that people say, "Oh, don't eat salt because of the high blood pressure." That's a misnomer. Lots of people down south have kidney stones. Mm-hmm. I am no exception to that, and it's because we deplete our body of salt, and we stay. Even though we drink, now let me make this statement: I drink a lot of water. I can drink up to 2 gallons a day, and still not have enough, because you lose a lot of heat, a lot of moisture from your body is through evaporation. Because when you're out in the sun, literally the moisture is evaporating out of your body constantly. On top of you sweating, dehydration is going to be the big issue for us. So hydration and replenishing the electrolytes in your system is going to be the...
Well, and on top of that, if you're actually working, for us in the summer, a really big deal is that... And I know it doesn't get as hot where we are as with us as it does with Danny, but for us it is a matter of do your work when it's really smart to do it, which is early in the morning, and then if you feel depleted mid-afternoon, it is appropriate to take a nap.
Yes, we take naps all the time during the middle of the day.
Yeah, it's really wise. It's your body just begging for a reprieve. Or find quiet time to do things in the house. For me, I like to do my YouTube editing or my spinning.
I do the same exact thing.
Yeah, and it's just a nice time to quiet down and not be punishing your body, because it does, over time, it builds up. It has a cumulative effect on you to be in these harsh conditions and force yourself through them when you could do it at a smarter time, or you could break it up throughout the day so that, but be wise and listen to your body in these extreme weather times.
The old people down here were very wise people, because they didn't have air conditioning, they didn't have all the things used to that we have here, and they have sayings down here. And one of the sayings that I learned as a very small child, because I was actually put in the fields to work at 12 years old. I had to go to the cucumber fields and pick cucumbers. And this is embedded in you from the time you're a child here, with people who are actually familiar with growing stuff in the South. You get up and you go to work when it's daylight enough to see how. You eat when you get hungry. You rest when you get tired, and any fool can tell when dark comes.
Right.
That's just a saying here, and that's what people here live by.
Well, and here's one thing I think that's really important to notice is the middle of this, where it said eat when you're hungry. A lot of times when you start homesteading, you feel like you have such a long list of things to do, and your back is against the wall, and you have just so many things that are important that have to be done now. For us in particular in the north, our growing season is so short
Right.
that we're just like, now. It has to be done now. Urgency. But if you don't feed yourself, if you don't get your hat on,
Yes.
if you don't get your good shoes on, if when you start to feel that first feeling of a little bit of heat stroke or sunstroke, if you don't listen to that, you can actually damage your internal organs.
Yes.
And it's not reversible to some degree. You have a tendency after that to fall prey to it easily.
You will.
Even though
Yeah.
you can recover and you can feel pretty well, you won't be the same again afterwards. And so it's very serious. To me, having a spouse that can take care of meals, if you're a homesteader, if you feel like you have to have this urgency of getting things done, you need somebody who can take care of you and take care of the things that need to be done so that you can keep your strength up. And if you don't, you need to just cut your work in half and just recognize I'm only one person. I don't have anybody to take care of me to help with meals, and thus I have to take a break and feed myself. I just won't get as much work done.
I think, Julie, that's extremely important. And it's what happens to a lot of homesteaders.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of homesteaders come in, they want what mom and dad and grandma and grandpa have overnight.
Overnight.
And they don't realize that it took them a lifetime to concur these type things. So they'll go out and they'll just work their fingers to the bone and do exactly what you're talking about. They'll have heat exhaustion, mild heat stroke, and once you do that, you are exactly correct. You're very susceptible to it from that point on.
Yeah.
I'm a prime example.
Me too.
You know,
We know because we've done it.
I did not listen to my body when I
Right?
should have, and now I get a little freak sometimes. I'm not gonna lie to you. When I get hot, it's like I can't recover.
Yeah.
And it actually scares me sometimes.
Yeah.
And you know, being a grown guy, I know that may sound crazy, but
To be feeble, to feel like you're
Yeah.
an old person. For me, it started when I was in my early 30s.
Yeah.
I had one summer where I lived on coffee, and I very infrequently ate, and I ended up falling prey to a virus at the time that laid me out for 3 weeks where I couldn't get off the couch, I couldn't move, and since then I cannot work full bore. I cannot work for more than a couple hours at a time. I have to take breaks frequently, and I have that virus that pops up in my system when I do overwork
right.
that won't go away now because my system was so damaged by my abuse.
Do you find that because of that, like me personally, because of the extreme heat of the summer, not paying attention to my body, I now every 2 hours have to have a protein in my system.
I do. Mm-hmm.
And it's because I damaged myself internally. And now if I don't get that protein in my system every 2 hours, my day's shot. I'm not no good for anything.
Well, and sometimes it can leapfrog into other days. It depends on how long you wait not to listen.
Yes.
For me, I can be at a real high and I can be doing really, really, really good, and then I'll skip one of those 2 hour eating sessions, and then I drop down, and my new plateau is here.
Yeah.
Until I build that back up because I have no reserves left.
And it can take days.
It can take days.
It can take days. That's the way it is here. And in the South, and it may be just as prevalent in the North. I do not know. It's very prevalent here because of the extreme heat. Now, a lot of times here, and I'll say this about to new homesteaders: do not overwhelm yourself. Grow small to start with. I know you may want to say, well, we're in a situation where
my husband's pointing at me. Stop pointing at me.
where you're sitting there going, but if there's a life-changing event, we've got to have enough food.
Yeah.
You know, and I hate to say it, but it's the honest truth. One and I are learning this in our older years. We can't do what we used to could do, and if we just got to learn to prepare smarter and do what we can do and trust God to meet the rest, you know.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, at least for us, infrastructure is incredibly important for us, especially in the summer, because the animals need water, and they need it now. They need shade, and they need it now. The garden needs to be watered on time, and the doors need to open when they have to open if we have a greenhouse. And so for us, automation was key to being able to handle some health problems. And one of the main reasons is because where we are, water comes to us in a canal. It's not pulling water off the land, it's actually delivering water to the land. And so we have a schedule that we have to be on. So for in our area in the north, which is the northwest, we have to have things on timers because we don't get rain. And we have to have things on timers because the greenhouse has to close at night because it's still cold in the summer. And then it has to open up in the morning before the sun comes out because we get a lot of sunshine and it'll get to 120 degrees in there. And so for me, for automation was the key for me because our natural environment is not one that will take care of our animals and that will provide water and that will, and so for me, my capacity to do it now that I've damaged my body, we had to put the money into the systems in order to be able to continue to do it, because otherwise I'd be outside in the heat all day long, redundant things that I have a brain that is somewhat wasted on the redundancy of what we do on our farm.
Mm-hmm.
I can do bigger, better things than go out and double check the things that I was having to double check. And so there was some money that had to be put into it to make those systems work. And it wasn't insignificant. It was significant money for us. But if we wanted to homestead, sometimes it's better not to do it the cheap way and to do it the right way. Once you learn what the right way is.
Once you learn the right way. Well, let me ask you a question then, because you brought up a very good point there. Is there some gardening vegetables that you can plant that doesn't require a lot of maintenance in the heat of the summer?
Nothing requires maintenance in the heat of the summer. Nothing is damaged by the heat.
Okay.
Nothing, as long as we don't go below freezing, nothing is harmed by that. We have a window from about June until the middle of September. June is a little iffy because it's still a little cold. So our summer, to all intents and purposes, is July through September. And so during that time, everything grows fast and abundant. You don't need to cover it at night. You don't need to worry about anything. As long as you deliver some water to it, it's going to grow. And so squash does well, tomatoes do well. Spinach starts to be a little bit unhappy, but there's other varieties of greens you can grow. Like we do a lot of Swiss chard because it handles cold and it handles heat. So we love Swiss chard for our greens.
Wow. See, on the other hand with us here, we have to pick certain plants for the heat. We have to, like, when we talked about this on one of our other videos about peas, we have to grow field peas in the heat because they can withstand drought. And that's usually what we have here. We have extreme heat, and even though it may rain a lot, the extreme heat, we can get 1 inch of rain today, and because we have 100-something degrees for 2 or 3 days, that water's gone. It is not here. So we can grow field peas, we can grow butter beans, bush butter beans, not running butter beans, but bush butter beans. They do extremely well in the heat. Okra does extremely well in the heat. So these are some things that we have to bank on for a food source. Sweet potatoes that are planted in the early part of the spring do extremely well in the dry part of the summer. Peanuts would be another one. We plant our peanuts in early spring. But by midsummer, when everything else is dying out, peanuts are flourishing.
Wow. Sweet
potatoes are flourishing. These are some things like this that we can do here because tomatoes is almost out of the question. Even though they're growing, like we talked about, make a tomato, they're almost out of the question. Occasionally you'll get a squash that's okay. Now, one variety here that will do good in the summertime is what's called the Heirloom patty pan. I don't know if y'all are familiar with those. We grow those here. They do fantastic here.
Yeah.
You know, for the average family, 3 plants is all you need.
Wow.
Because they will just produce and they just keep going. I mean,
the only thing we can't grow, we can grow everything that's cold tolerant still. Peas, everything, carrots, cabbages, everything will still continue to grow in the summer except spinach. But our problem in the summer with growing is that our season is so short. We have to be very careful to pick the variety because we can't grow any kind of melons. Melons won't grow, at least in our area.
Right.
There are some places like in northern Idaho you might be able to get some kind of melon, but we can't grow any kind of melons. Cucumbers, if you baby them and plant them early on, we could get cucumbers. Squash and pumpkins do really well for us.
Now, let me stop.
Mm-hmm.
When you say squash, are you talking about summer squash or winter squash?
Both.
Both.
We do really well with squash.
Okay, so it doesn't matter if it's a crookneck or whether
Doesn't
it's
matter. Mother Hubbard,
a spaghetti squash
acorn,
or whatever,
everything will do
acorn
fine.
squash, all that.
all that'll do really well.
Wow.
We have to plant it in a careful window, but squash loves us. But with tomatoes and peppers, what happens is that the bush has finally gotten big enough that the bush has finally become big enough that you have lots of tomatoes on it. It's beautiful. But that's as you're getting into September.
Oh.
And you have your first frost in September.
And the tomatoes are still not ripe?
They're not ripe. So you have this big, beautiful bush full of tomatoes, and they're not ripe. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll pick our green tomatoes, and we'll turn them into relishes and mincemeat pies. And what you'll also do is you'll want big counters, and you'll put down box lids with newspaper in them.
Yes.
And you'll pick all your green tomatoes and put them there, and they'll ripen a little bit at a time, and you can continue to use them through the winter. You can still have tomatoes in January and February because you're picking these tomatoes that are ripening over time to eat them, and that's how you do it, unless you have a heated greenhouse. It's not good enough just to have a greenhouse if you have tomatoes. So the problem is you need a portable greenhouse because you don't want the tomatoes in the greenhouse in the summer.
Yes, I agree.
It gets too hot.
Yeah.
So if you have a greenhouse, you open all the doors so you have good venting through it during the day so they don't get too hot. But if you have one out in the field that's growing really well, you have to find some way of getting a greenhouse over the top of it in September so that as the nights start to get cold, you actually have them ripening. So day length as far as like short growing season.
You would be growing a determinate rather than an interdeterminate.
Yeah. Oh, but unless you have a heated greenhouse.
Unless you have a heated greenhouse, yeah. Wow, because see here we do not grow determinates here.
Mm-hmm.
We grow an interdeterminate because our season is so long. We can have tomatoes all summer long, even though in the extreme heat they don't do good.
Mm-hmm.
If we are very careful with our sucker sprouts and keep watching them as they come off at the ground, even though the plant is taxed, if we cut the plant off and let one of the new suckers go and put the nutrition back to it, we can actually have fall tomatoes off the same plant.
Wow.
You know, which is, and I'm sitting here listening to you. In other words, what I'm hearing is, it's extremely hard for y'all to have tomatoes to can.
Never. I don't know anybody that cans tomatoes because they come on a little bit at a time.
See here, we can pick them by the 5-gallon bushels.
Wow.
5-gallon buckets, I'm sorry. The 5-gallon buckets, it's nothing for us to pick, 2 or 3 5-gallon buckets at a time and bring them in to can.
Wow. We get some pretty good harvests of like a big shirtful every couple days, but our varieties that will grow for us they're quite juicy, they're not fleshy, and so it's hard to get a nice thick paste. Nice thick sauce is very runny, and so the variety of tomatoes that we can get is a little tricky because the flavor's not strong enough to pull a good tomato flavor in. It's just watery, like beefsteak type tomatoes. I try so hard to get paste tomatoes, and they never seem to quite have enough time to all come on at the same time. And our space is so limited because we have the greenhouse to grow in, and all the tomatoes that we need to grow needs to be in that space. So if we want eating tomatoes and paste tomatoes, then our whole greenhouse has to be tomatoes in order to have enough to can.
Wow.
So we do like green tomato types of
So y'all eat a lot of green tomato stuff. So what about tomatillos? Have you ever considered tomatillos?
I've grown we call them, what do we call them? The ground cherries. We call them ground cherries.
Yeah.
We do the dessert kind of ground cherries, and I've grown tomatillos, and we've grown a lot of peppers even without the greenhouse. For us, and this is just personal preference, John really likes pickled peppers. So usually I'll do pickled peppers, and we'll eat ground cherries fresh, the more dessert flavored ones rather than the salsa ones. But I mean that could change. But John just likes pickled peppers so much that I've never bothered to make salsa out of it.
That's extremely interesting. So even in the summer months, you think that everything is okay everywhere in the United States. There's a vast difference between the two of us, even between the North and the South.
Right. Huge.
Huge difference. So a homesteader that's been used to living down south, if he was to go up north,
You'd be planting at all the wrong times of the year.
we would fail.
Yeah. Huge failure.
Yeah. And vice versa. When y'all come down here, you'd be waiting to get started, and everybody else
And
would
it'd be
already
too
have,
late.
it'd be too late.
That's what Trisha's told us. She's like, I'm fixing to getting my garden started, and you'll get here just in time. And I'm like, are you doing it just to like please me? Isn't everything going to die?
No.
Because I just keep thinking everything's going to die. What do you mean you're going to plant in February? Everything's going to die.
No.
Are you
No.
just trying to get me there faster so we can plant a garden together? There's no way that's going to succeed.
No, actually, where Trish is at is she would be right on target.
Really?
Yeah.
Not that I don't trust you, Trish, because I totally trust you, but I just don't understand it. I can't wrap my brain
we're going to
around
be
it.
planting in February, so I know if we plant
Yeah.
in February, she's probably can be planting maybe
Yeah.
some tomatoes and peppers in February. I don't know, you know.
And she has the same soil you do. She has sandy soil.
Yes, well,
and
everything
so-
below a certain parallel is all sandy.
Is it?
Yeah.
So she says she has a really hard time holding nutrients.
Yes,
in
it's
her, in her
extremely
soil.
difficult. Yes.
But
You have to be constantly. I mean, you see my yard. You see the amount of leaves there are in my yard.
Mhm.
Wanda and I are constantly amending leaves into our garden.
I love that.
You know, we're constantly doing that.
And it's beautiful. This is beautiful here. So that's summer, north versus south. I'm really excited to move into fall
Really excited to move into fall.
because that's our big harvest time.
Well, I guess you could say it is here for us on some things.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so make sure to go check out Danny and Wanda's channel, Deep South Homestead, because we're going to talk about harvesting and fall, and we're going to move out of summer here and talk about what I think is probably the most exciting time of year for me.
Yeah, it is.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay. You can plant it all year long up until the point, like if you plant it in August, you'll probably still be eating peas in October. You'll be eating peas in October, but you can still plant peas and carrots in August.
Now, there's the difference between north and south here that I want to bring out. When you say peas, see, when we say peas down south, it's completely different than what you call peas.
Yeah.
Because when you say peas, I'm assuming now that you're talking about English peas.
Shelling peas or snow peas.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We're talking about crowders.
What is that?
That is a field pea.
Okay.
A field pea here will only grow in extreme heat.
And do you eat it?
Yes.
So is
Yes.
it more like a bean?
It has more of a peanut taste to it.
Ah.
You need to fix them some field peas so that they understand.